Morning, everybody. My name's Michael Coote. I'm CEO of AUSVEG, but for the 7 years prior to taking over that role, I was the National Export Manager for the vegetable industry. Thanks to Berries Australia for the opportunity to come and, share the story of export development in the vegetable industry. There's probably some parallels you'll see from what Jeff's just presented, and also some of the initiatives and activities that we do to support vegetable growers. Jenny's probably already down the track of getting some of those key things in place for your sector, which is fantastic. So first, I'm just going to provide a brief overview of our industry and our export footprint, then I'll outline how our industry goes about export development, and finally highlight some key learnings from our sector that might be relevant for berry growers that are considering moving into export. So for those of you that aren't familiar with AUSVEG, we're the national peak body for the vegetable industry, representing nearly a $5 billion industry with over 3,000 commercial growers. In addition to some agri-political advocacy and representation activities, we also deliver a range of services to support growers, whether it's around biosecurity, comms and extension, and international trade development, hence why I'm here today. And in terms of export development, for nearly 10 years, we've delivered a range of different support services for vegetable growers looking to export. We call this creatively the Vegetable Industry Export Program, and it's aimed squarely at providing growers with assistance to export themselves via helping to build capacity and capability, a lot of focus on connecting growers directly with international customers, and some technical market access work as well, which I probably won't go into as much detail as Jeff did around some of that stuff. But in terms of an overview of our industry, look, there's a lot of figures on the screen there. I hope you can read that, but I'll just highlight a few. So last year we produced over 3.8 million tonnes of fresh vegetables, around 220,000 tonnes exported. It's around about 6 or 7% of production by value. So look, 93% of our production is still consumed domestically here in Australia via retail, processing or food service channels. We do export to over 50 international markets annually, but our primary markets are across Asia and the Middle East. So while exports might not be a significant portion of our total production, for some crops it may be up to a third of our volume of productions exported, and for some of our growers, they're actually 100% export focused and do not supply the domestic market. That's predominantly some folks in the West. Some of our other crops, we're only exporting 1 or 2 or 3% of production around a decade ago, and that might be up to sort of 5 or 7 or 10% now. So we've had some success there in taking some more product off the domestic market. And we have seen pretty strong growth in our total industry exports over the last 5 or 10 years. The berry industry is probably at the point we might have been at a few years ago, but I think ours is more of a story of developing markets, more so than probably the market access story that Jeff just outlined for the table grape industry. So how much are we exporting to and where? Well, pre-COVID, we were on track to meet our industry strategic target of around $300 million annually in export value by 2020. We peaked at 280 million in 2019, and still managed to hit a target of about 250 million last year, even with the supply chain market, freight disruptions, etc., that we're all currently facing. So you may note from that graph on the right that when we peaked in 2019, our export volume was slightly over 230,000 tonnes, and in 2021, this was still slightly over 220,000 tonnes. So we only dropped around 10,000 tonnes in total volume of exports during COVID, but this was all nearly air freighted, more highly perishable produce lines, while sea freighted staple vegetable products lines were either stable or grew. So during COVID, we sent more carrots, onions and potatoes offshore basically. So I said we shipped to over 50 international markets. It's probably about 15 markets in meaningful volumes, and the top 5 markets for us currently, they're all open, non-protocol, highly competitive markets like Singapore, the UAE, Malaysia, Hong Kong and Saudi Arabia. In terms of our top export crops, they include carrots is by far our largest and key export crop, so over 100,000 tonnes and around $90 million annual export value. Potatoes is around 40 million in export value and close to 48,000 tonnes. Onions, nearly 50,000 tonnes and about $33 million in export value. Asparagus, in 2021, exports are down pretty heavily due to freight largely, but we still managed 1,200 tonnes at around $10 million in export value. And celery also down heavily in 2021, but still about 4,700 tonnes and $9 million in value. So yeah, our sector obviously comprises a range of different crops or products that all have their own sort of characteristics and dynamics when it comes to trade, different market access, freight considerations, etc. So a bit of a different story probably to a single commodity industry like the table grape story we just heard. So in terms of some other interesting points to help you understand the diverse characteristics that make up our export trade. So carrot growers export 1/3 of total carrot production, so much higher than the 7% average across our sector. 85% of this 100,000 tonnes comes out of a handful of pretty established grower exporters in Western Australia. Over 50% of our asparagus production pre-COVID is normally exported, all by air, predominantly from Victoria to the Japanese market. Over 70% of our potato exports go to South Korea, largely for the processing or chipping market, with the rest going into retail, fresh channels in other markets. We don't have we've got very limited market access to China or exposure to the Chinese market, so there was only access for asparagus and lettuce across our whole category, but very, very limited exports in the past, so we don't have the issue that some of the other Australian commodity groups that have attained market access to China have in terms of the need to diversify to find a home for a lot of other products. And the vast majority, so close to 95% of our export trade for fresh vegetables is to non-protocol markets. So we've only got basically 4 protocols governing trade or established for trade in specific vegetable crops to individual markets. And in addition to some technical requirements for trade to New Zealand for some of our fruit fly host vegetables. So there are over 40, I think it's around 43 export protocols across the horticulture sector for Australian trade, but only 4 of these are for fresh vegetables. And about 80% of our exports are hard vegetable staple product lines, carrots, onions, potatoes, but over the last 5 to 7 years or so, we've achieved really strong growth in more perishable vegetable lines like broccoli, lettuce, leafy salad products and celery. So why am I telling you all of this? Basically to highlight that the vegetable industry is diverse. I know all of our industries in horticulture think we're diverse and unique, and we all are, but we do comprise a lot of different crops. And the needs of all of the growers in our industry that grow and desire to export these crops are all different. And so our aspiring, emerging and experienced exporters have different needs, and we try to service them differently with a range of different offerings, I guess, at an industry level. And so we tried to develop an export program probably 6 or 7 years ago that catered for all this diversity. And I guess for our vegetable industry export program, direct grower support and grower outcomes are focused around 3 main areas. So like export readiness and training, which we've heard some about already, market development and market access. And this may be a simplistic diagram, but the benefits vary across these platforms or work streams for different growers. So generally, smaller growers or those not yet exporting see the most benefit from some of the export readiness activities in that work stream through gaining knowledge and experience to becoming export ready, to commence or extend exports by attending training programs. Jenny mentioned the online fundamentals program that Berries Australia's just launched for your industry. We've got a really similar program for our industry, and that's been really successful in terms of upskilling growers that probably are aspiring exporters, so haven't been that active yet or taken that first step. For our probably mid-sized growers or those that have been doing a little bit of export, they get the most benefit out of our market development activities, which I'll talk a bit more about shortly, but basically that assists them to build relationships directly with buyers and deepen understanding of international supply chains, as well as expanding their network of customers and other in-market contacts. And for our more experienced, larger grower exporters who've typically been in export for a long time, so didn't necessarily need an industry body coming in trying to tell them how to do things, they get probably the most benefit out of some of the market access activities in terms of new markets that are opening up for the sector. So I'll talk about some of the more practical services that we deliver for the vegetable industry next. But I guess the design of this program and this sort of construct for our sector has been to try and help growers scale up and transition from being inexperienced exporters or just aspiring exporters to medium-sized or emerging. And I'll highlight, Jenny mentioned how Berries Australia is funding some of their activities, and I'll highlight that over the years we've funded a lot of our industry export activities via our R&D levies in partnership with Hort Innovation, as well as some initiatives with other funding bodies, including different state and federal governments, and some things part funded by AUSVEG and growers themselves. So, when I say export readiness or capability development, what do I mean? For our industry, this is predominantly training offerings to upskill, provide advice, troubleshoot issues, and create industry resources for growers to use within their own businesses. Since 2015, AUSVEG has delivered an industry-specific export training program for vegetable growers, and we currently have two training courses available for our sector. Pre-COVID, obviously, this might have been face-to-face, but we've transitioned it to an online e-learning delivery model in 2020. So the Export Fundamentals program targets aspiring and emerging exporters, and we've put over 120 growers and or staff from grower businesses through this training. So the intent of this program is to export interested growers with the information needed to understand everything involved in the export of fresh vegetables, whether it's export marketing, understanding terms of trade, technical market access, etc. We've also got a cultural business etiquette training program available online, which is targeted at more experienced exporters to refine, their engagement approach when dealing with international customers across 4 more culturally challenging markets. In addition to these sorts of training pieces, we also provide a lot of market intelligence and data solutions for exporting growers in our sector. You heard both Jenny and Jeff mention the importance of that, and it is absolutely critical. And look, some of the progress or outcomes we've seen from having this kind of program offering includes, increased participation from growers in different export events, training, workshops, all those sorts of things, including experienced exporters starting to send more junior or new staff to export training as either induction or professional development. So it's not just for those that are looking to understand export. Some of the bigger businesses are utilising this program pretty heavily. More of our businesses are appointing a dedicated sort of export manager or export coordinator in their business to facilitate exports as they've identified the commitment required to successfully export. More businesses actually developing a strategy or a plan for their export ambitions. And look, probably a key outcome that I'll highlight here from having all this training available, which I personally think is hugely important, is that a number of growers have got involved and done this training, gained a really good understanding of some of the challenges that they're going to face and the time required to successfully commence exporting, and made a decision for themselves that the timing's not right, or they don't have the capacity in their business right now to begin exporting. And look, we see this as a really great outcome, because like the industry priority is not just to get everyone exporting, or just to get more growers exporting if it's at the expense of someone's viability if they're not ready. In terms of market development support for our industry, this is where we probably focus most of our time and investment. So AUSVEG delivers a range of combination of inbound and outbound trade activities per year. Obviously derailed a bit over the last couple of years with COVID and travel disruptions, but some things are starting to get put back in the calendar going forward, which is great. So typically pre-COVID, we'd do about 5 outbound trade missions to priority markets each year, taking anywhere from 10 to 20 growers to each, to get growers to basically connect with each other, as well as making contacts with potential customers, growing their understanding of the market and retail landscapes in each location. So these sorts of missions have really helped break down some of the barriers between growers and have started driving some collaboration in the sector, which is really great. And it's also helped a lot of growers see that more often than not, other Australian growers are not your competition in export markets. Some export markets. One nice outcome has also been that we've started to see a lot of the more experienced growers, actually providing advice, sharing insights, and helping to upskill some of the newer entrants in our sector. We supplement some of the outbound trade mission activities with a large annual inbound trade mission, which sees us bring around 40 international buyers out once a year for a pretty large mission that we run in the lead up to our industry conference, Hort Connections. And so the purpose of that is to, both deepen relationships, get customers out on farm, show them, Australian production environments, why our produce is so great, etc., and generally build and deepen relationships and friendships with a lot of customers in different markets. So market access support, similar to probably what Jenny's outlined as well. We develop and submit, applications where there's a priority identified by our industry for a new market opportunity or a new product opportunity into a new market, and deal with the formal processes with the Hort Innovation and the federal department. So I think we've submitted near 10 applications in the last 5 or 6 years, all which are at different stages of progress. And we also provide input and advice to government to support bilateral negotiations, some MRL work. We're talking to Jeff about rolling out his app for our industry as well. And we spend a lot of time providing direct advice to individual growers on specific market access queries or issues. We also maintain a team internally at AUSVEG with a great contact database of international customers and in-market service providers, which is really useful for our growers. So I just want to include a couple of photos to give you an idea of what I mean when I've been talking about all these trade missions, resources, training programs, etc. So on the screen are some images showing some of our training courses, taking growers, leading missions into foreign markets, exhibiting at trade shows, bringing international buyers to visit Australia, developing information resources, etc. What you notice from the photos is that in pretty much every one you'll see growers, so growers participating in training, growers taking the time to visit retailers in export markets, growers hosting international buyers on their farms. One of the key priorities for us is, and we've gone some way to achieving it, is creating an export culture in our industry, and it takes growers like yourselves to actually get involved in industry export activities. You build knowledge, you create connections that can be useful domestically and internationally. You represent your industry, and you get some really tangible returns from your R&D levy investments if this is how some of these activities end up being funded for your sector. So I think probably getting close to time, but I just want to finish with a couple of really simple points that I think are the most valuable. You'll probably see some similarities here from what Jeff said, because I think they're pretty consistent across all industries looking to develop exports. But from what I've learnt for our sector with all the export development activities that AUSVEG has provided to vegetable growers over the years, if you're going to take away a couple of key insights from today, they are as follows. Firstly, you've got to understand the market or markets that you're looking to export to. So utilise that industry data, ask questions, engage with the trade people in Berries Australia and Hort Innovation, attend training courses to understand, technical or market requirements, build your networks, engage with other growers or exporters who are already active in export markets. Chances are the export opportunity or market that you're looking at, someone else has already looked at. So, there's a lot of knowledge out there that you should look to draw on. And also, key point is to understand that it is not just one market, the export market. It's multiple markets, all with different ways of doing business, cultural nuances, technical requirements, etc. Secondly, identify the most appropriate route to market or way to service this market. Is it to export directly yourself? Is it to export via an agent? Is it to partner with another grower who is already servicing the market? I think everyone needs to ask themselves the question, do you have the capacity to do it all yourself right now, or is there another way? You have to visit the market or markets. There's no substitute for being on the ground in a foreign country or city, visiting retail stores, inspecting importer or retailer facilities to determine who you do want to partner with. Many ways to do this, of course. We've talked about different trade missions we run. Jeff said similar thing that happens for table grape industry, and I'm sure there'll be some opportunities coming up in the future for berry growers to get in market on some broader industry activities. Do it yourself, self-travel, do it while you're on holiday. And even if you're going to supply an agent or an existing exporter and not export directly yourself to the market, it's important to gain an understanding of how the supply chain works and where your produce is going to. So go and have a look yourself. And finally, everyone needs to appreciate that developing export trade is a long-term business development opportunity and commitment. It's not a short-term proposition. You can't come in and drop out of a market and expect it to work. I don't think even your Australian customers would sort of put up with that. So why would we expect that to work in export markets? So look, that's been a pretty quick overview, I guess, of the vegetable industry and our kind of export footprint. I'll wrap it up there. Happy to take questions through the panel session or after today, but hopefully there's some useful insights there or parallels for for berry growers that are looking to export from some of our experiences. So thank you.